Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's version of Spirituality Out Loud. This week, I am so excited. We have George Kao. George is a business coach who is a champion for generosity in business and honesty in marketing. Instead of salesy and predatory tactics that we've probably all experienced as consumers, he has coached many clients since 2009, and he offers his comprehensive content for free through his website, www.georgekao.com. He is the author of the book, Authentic Content Marketing, Build an Engaged Audience for Your Personal Brand Through Integrity and Generosity. And he is also my own personal coach. So it's really exciting to have him here and to get to learn a little bit more about your personal journey. So welcome, George.
Thank you, Leslie. This is so fun for me. And I'll tell you, we talked about this before. I get invited to do some podcasts, and I actually don't do most of the podcast invitations that I get invited to, but with the topic that you raised felt so interesting and important and meaningful to me that I'm excited to kind of get the message out about this. So
yeah. And the interesting thing about it is, I highly recommend, if you are interested, to go check out George's work. And I will put all of the information and how to get a hold of him in the liner notes and in the notes. But I don't know that I really know what your spiritual take is, because you talk a lot about authenticity and you talk a lot about these, what I consider to be spiritual ideas, but you don't actually ever name, not that I know of. I mean, I don't hear all your content, but I don't know that you name things.
Uh-huh.
So I'm really excited to hear kind of your journey.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So where we start here is how you grew up. What were you raised with a religion? Were you raised with spirituality? Were you not? And what was your experience of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll say this, I do think that how we're raised in terms of our religion or spirituality has like a lifelong impact on how we see things. I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like, for example, a lot of people who are raised, Christians, no matter whether they stay there or go away, they'll always have that worldview inform in some way, like the way they see things, or the way they learn, or the way they kind of put meaning to life. Not necessarily in that religion or not, but it's like, just like, certain religions are more structured, other religions are maybe more sort of charismatic or heart-based. And, so that's a great question. So I was raised in Taiwan, where the religion was, there's, of course, as any country, there's lots of religions, but the one that was very common in Taipei, the capital city, at least among my family, extended family, was now I used to call it Buddhist, and a lot of people don't realize that the Buddhism that we know in the West is not necessarily the Buddhism that you encounter in the East. Like, people go, Buddhism, oh yeah, that's, meditation and Zen and, the Eightfold Path and all that stuff, right? But the Buddhism I was raised with was very different. It was more like ancestral worship, interestingly. Like, we had an altar with our great-great-grandfather, like, at home, and like incense burning all the time. And that was just normal. Like, you walk into homes of people like me, and lots of our friends and family had these altars, and just, the smell of incense, and there's food being offered on the altars, and the picture of how many generations ago, the whatever the first picture we had was, really, of the ancestor. And we also had statues of various gods, deities in our home. And like, I remember very clearly, there was a deity like who held this this weapon, and is like very fierce looking. And I'm sure now, if I look back, there's like so much meaning behind each deity, like what that symbolizes in life or whatnot. But back then, I just thought it was kind of weird and cool to have these different deities. And the most maybe the most revered deity in Taiwan at the time, maybe still now, is Guan Yin. Guan Yin, people call it Kuan Yin, or Guan Yin Pusa was the Chinese way of saying it. It's this woman who, well, actually, it's interesting. We usually think of her as a woman, but now I'm not so sure that she was only like, she was very androgynous, actually, the pictures of her, but she had long hair, and it was like the mother of compassion, and just like, that's all I remember, to be honest. And I now, the last few decades that I've been in the West, I've heard of Guan Yin a few times, and some people really revere her as well, as a symbol of love and forgiveness and gentleness, and kind of wanting to save others. We might say like a 2 on the Enneagram, actually.
There you go. Yeah.
So Leslie and I both know something about the Enneagram, and so anyway.
And I'm a 2.
Yeah, Leslie's a 2. So you'll resonate with Guan Yin a lot.
Yeah.
So that's how I grew up. And so what we did was we went to temple on a regular basis, maybe, well, not like every weekend, but maybe like once a month or once every couple months, and we would be taught to hold an incense and pray. But it wasn't a prayer. It wasn't going to temple to meditate. It wasn't about spiritual development. It was prayer that we would get good grades, or that our family's money situation would be good, and that we would be healthy, and so has a problem in their life. Like it was like asking the deities. And literally, these temples would have different corners, different, like, you go to a temple and then there would be different rooms with different deities. And so you would take the incense and you'd have to, keep lighting it. But you go to a different room with a different deity. That this deity is all about wealth. This deity is all about health. This deity is about getting good grades, or whatever it is. And we would go to that deity and pray for that thing we want. So
that's how it was instructed for you, though.
Yes.
Like, you were told
Yes.
that this is what you're doing. It wasn't
Yes.
like you were a child and decided.
Right.
Right. A lot of kids do that, right? It's this Santa Claus-y type of prayer, right?
Yeah, that was what we were instructed. And actually, thinking back now, I mean, in now that I'm a bit more, I've read a little bit more about sort of world religion. I think it might be some kind of mix between Taoism and Buddhism. Mm-hmm. So that's how I grew up when I was, and I came to the state. We immigrated to the States from Taiwan to the United States when I was about 7 years old. And so once I got here, we shortly moved to Orange County, California, which those of you who don't know is like one of the conservative bastions of America. Republican, evangelical Christian. And in junior high, I got converted to Evangelical Christianity.
By choice, or from the family, or how did that happen?
No. So my parents still to this day are, actually I think they're kind of mixed up now, but because they've been in the West so long. But no, it wasn't from my parents. It was from my brothers. One of my brothers who got converted, while hanging out with some classmates or whatever, and then kind of converted me. I remember being taken to like a Billy Graham type of event, the kind of Christian rah-rah, like, all right, if you felt something, come to the front, come to the, like kind of like an altar call where you go to the front and you get like blessed, and, they pray over you, and like they tell you what to, to read this little pamphlet to say that you're giving your life over to Jesus. So yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
What was your experience of that? Were you excited about it, or just
yeah.
like whatever?
No. It was, one of the things that I think a lot of, non-Christians don't realize is that Christians put on a great event. Like, evangelicals know how to inspire.
Yeah.
They make really good salespeople too, I would say, you know, but they know how to, I mean, they awesome music. Like, like those of you who don't know, like you should go check out some contemporary Christian music. Like it's rocking. It's really good stuff, you know, and like even worship, like singing about Jesus and God, like they it's really modern sound, you know. Even now, sometimes I'll like turn on Pandora and go to like the Christian rock station because it's just uplifting modern music that sometimes talks about Jesus, but which, as you might be able to tell, I'm no longer, I would no longer call myself an evangelical Christian. And I don't know, maybe there are some friends and family hearing this who are like, what? I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't really talked about this. Like you've said, I haven't really been public about this, even though I haven't tried to hide it either. Just haven't had an opportunity. So, and I don't want to offend anybody. That's the other thing, right? Because I still have some good friends and family who are very evangelical. And I will say that I am so grateful. So I was evangelical Christian from high school, junior high school through most of college. And so those are my formative years of like becoming like a knowledgeable adult in the world or whatever. And so a lot of my philosophy really came from the Christian worldview. My real philosophy, like, being able to understand concepts and learn. And so I'll say this, I think I'm so grateful for my time as a Christian because of the heart opening that I had there, which is interesting because a lot of people think fundamental. By the way, I should say, for those who don't know, evangelical Christian is a particular denomination. You know, there are, or a particular group of denominations. Like there are, you may have heard of Methodists or Episcopalians. Episcopalians, I would not call them evangelicals. Methodists, those are what's called mainline Christianity, which is more liberal-minded, open-minded, like not necessarily Jesus is the only way. You have to confess your sins and claim him as Lord to be saved kind of Christians, interestingly. But evangelical Christians are some Presbyterians, some Baptists, some Lutherans, and fundamentalists, and also some charismatic Christianity. So I equate, in my mind, I equate evangelical and fundamentalist Christianity as one. I would have called myself fundamentalist Christian, like proudly so, actually, because I would say, yes, we are all about the fundamentals. The Bible is the word of God, the inerrant, literal word of God, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I grew up in that way. I mean, in my formative years, again, Republican in Orange County, I thought Reagan was like the man. Like he was like, he is the right, and Democrats, like demons, like they're bad, you know, like Democrats are bad, like liberal people, like they just don't care about the fundamentals of what's right and true and straight and narrow. And that's how I was raised. And,
I would never have guessed.
Yeah, but ironically, even despite that kind of seemingly strict ways of walking the world, there was a tremendous amount of heart opening that was happening within those communities. The music was just brought you, literally sometimes to your knees in the beauty of the message of, well, God, you are unconditionally loved because you're a Christian. Okay. You're saved. Like all of your sins are forgiven. Like you can't do anything wrong as long as you keep trying to come back to God. Like it's all going to be good. And that we are taught to love others. It's like, it's a wonderful message, to be honest. It's like, we're taught to be honest, to be generous, to have integrity, to be continually trying to save people,
In a community. Right, you had this big community,
and wonderful community. Like I really think that there are few places in the world really where you find such brotherhood, sisterhood.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful. And when people are Christians, I'm like, bless you, wonderful. It's just great. Like if you love it, it's great. And some people feel straitjacketed by it, and maybe that's not right for them. But some people are like, I really thrive here, and that's wonderful. I think it's great.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who have found so much fulfillment in that path, and I love that. And You've just said so many things that I want to talk about. One of the things, since you have both, it's really interesting. You talked about how what you were raised in really like it formats how you think and how you see, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
one of the things I think that happens in Christianity is it's a dualist, right? Black and
Yes.
white. It's the
Yes.
good or evil, right?
Yeah.
But it's not in the Buddhism. It's not as much. I mean, you
Yes.
have some saints, so you have a little
Yes.
bit of, but, and do you think that I don't know if this is true, do you hold a gray? Like, would it be easier to hold the truth of gray, right? That not everything is black and white, not everything is true or false, with the idea of being raised in a place where you had all of these deities? I mean,
Oh,
I don't know if you've ever thought
yeah.
about it, but it's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting idea to me that part of the reason we're so yes or no, or,
Yeah.
is this Christianity black and white thinking,
Yeah. There's only one God, and you either
right?
believe or don't believe. You're either a believer or not non-believer.
Yep.
You know.
It's always the toggle. And
Yeah.
that it's not so much a toggle switch in the Eastern
Yes.
philosophies,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
And
Yes.
so yeah, how is that? Does that have any?
Yeah. No. I absolutely. So yes, I think that it was in the religion I grew up in, like, it wasn't about whether you're saved or not, which is again a dualistic concept, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
in evangelicalism, it's like if you've confessed your sins, like in your heart you believe Jesus is Lord, then you're saved, no matter what a bad person you are. Like you
Mm.
can, like literally, the idea is you can do evil your entire life, and if on your deathbed you confess Jesus as Lord, please forgive me of my sins, you'll go to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Like evangelical Christians have to admit to that, because that's
Mm-hmm.
what the theology is. But in deist, the Taoist Buddhist religion I grew up in, it wasn't like that. It was it was works based. Like the more good things you did for others, the more likely you'll reincarnate
Mm-hmm.
as with more wealth or opportunities, or be better looking or whatever it may be. Like had more privilege basically
I
in the
didn't know you're
world.
going to be better looking. Hey, then I'm in. Then I'm in.
And no, and
Interesting.
then if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
if you don't do good as good of things, you'll reincarnate as an animal. Like they are
Mm.
always like scaring us. Oh, you're reincarnated as a pig or as a cockroach or something if you keep doing that kind of thing.
Interesting.
So yeah, it was more a scale of badness to goodness, you might say.
Yeah.
But so what happened was, I think, like I said, growing up with that kind of idea of reincarnation and sort of multiple gods did allow me to exit my Christian phase more easily than if I had completely grown up as a Christian, obviously. Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds like you were pretty, I mean, entrenched sounds, but you were
Yeah.
you had a
Yeah.
community,
Oh
you do
yeah.
this thing,
Yes.
and then so how does that, what is this, what
Yeah.
did something occur? How did the
Yeah.
switch happen?
So what was interesting is that um, I actually have to again give credit to Christianity again for this, because I got so into being a Christian that I really tried my best to embody the values. And one of the values is the zealous search for truth,
Hmm.
and as well as the open-heartedness to be compassionate to others. And that combination, being in a college environment, made me be willing to listen to others' stories about their spiritual journeys. And what started happening was, as I listened to other spiritual, and part of the reason was because I was trying to convert them.
Hmm.
And so one way to convert someone is to start talking about their religion and spiritual journey and see if I could somehow persuade them to turn to Jesus, kind of thing. But again, thank God for Christianity, the idea of truth seeking, open-heartedness meant that I was, and humility, by the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Humility meant that I had to listen.
Mm.
I had to truly listen to somebody's spiritual journey. And what happened was I started hearing multiple spiritual journeys that didn't correlate with what I was being taught in church and what I couldn't find in the Bible, Christian Bible. And so I had to then go, wait a minute. My humility, my willingness to really seek the truth openly. And also I was trying to convert one of my professors.
You
And
go
he,
big.
yeah, and he gave me this concept that forever changed my life. He said, George, your earnest search for the truth is a wonderful thing. But in the search for truth, you have got to be willing sometimes to be uncertain.
Mm.
Because if you are certain, it means you only have a set of eyeglasses that you're seeing, like you have red colored glasses, you're seeing everything as red or green or whatever it may be. And that's certainty, that's glued to your face. But if you're not willing to take off those glasses, oh, this is the green colored glasses, let me try the red ones, or let me try the blue ones or yellow ones, or let me try just a non-color, like you'll never be able to see more colors in the world and what more truth there is in the world. And so he said, are you open to being uncertain to see what happens? And I said, well, yes, the humility of Christ and the sort of the yearning for truth means that I do need to be open to uncertainty. And what happened was I started like browsing the used bookstores of my college town and the spirituality sections. And my mind was blown. I'm like, wow, these concepts, these stories, these ways of being and thinking are not taught in my church. And what does that mean, therefore? And then I entered into a phase where I got really scared for like 2 years that I was going to hell.
Yeah, I bet.
I was because again, everybody around me, I situated myself among a circle of friends who were all brothers and sisters, brothers in Christ. And gosh, if I don't believe this anymore, does that mean I'm going to hell?
Yeah.
Because it was about belief. Evangelicals, it's not about works, it's about belief. And so faith. And gratefully, I did come across some books that over time gave me a different view of spiritual growth. I have to credit the author M. Scott Peck. His most popular book was called The Road Less Traveled. It was really popular in the 80s and 90s. And then I read all of his books, basically. And one of his books was called In Heaven as on Earth, which was his kind of fictional account of the afterlife. And it was beautiful. It was wonderful. And I guess Scott Peck, this author, is technically a Christian, but now I realize he's mainline Christian. So he was much more liberal and open-minded about it. So I think reading his books really helped to allow me to see other ways and study other ways. Yeah.
Wow. There's a couple things that really stood out in that. This idea of open to uncertainty.
Yeah.
I gotta say, you teach that as a principle in your work. I don't know if you hold that way, but there is.
It's important in marketing too.
Well, I mean, I guess, right? Like you do like you've been doing your work for a really long time. And so one of the things you keep doing is like question, is this still true? Is this true? So you're constantly, a lot of these people, other marketing or whatever, the work that you do, it's like, I am certain this is right. And you do hold it open palm, which is hard, right?
Yeah.
I do want to concretize things. So it's interesting that I don't know if you think about it that way, but you're still doing that today.
Yeah.
And just the idea that you are such a seeker.
Yeah.
Right? Like you even had your answer, but you still spent time, space, and energy going and saying, okay, like let's go research. And so, but why? Like, why do you think? Because you were just interested in it, or because you wanted to convert people better, or because now you just needed to hold this uncertainty you had? Like, what was that?
Well, because I became convinced, and again, this is probably thanks to Christianity, that the question of what happens after we die is maybe the most important question a human being can grapple with. Because my God, we're all gonna die, and so what happens afterwards? That's really scary. I still have friends who are really, really scared of dying.
Most people.
Most people
in the Western culture.
Yeah, most people are, because of course, there's the pain of dying, which of course is scary on its own. But then what happens afterwards? Like, do you just kind of fall asleep and there's nothingness? Or do you feel trapped, or what's going on? And what does that mean, therefore, and how we live today? And so because of that urgency of discovering what that is, because of course I was scared of going to hell. I'm like, is there a way out of this?
Yeah.
I think that's a really big one. And so I became, at one point, I would call it post-Christian.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people, maybe increasingly, there are a lot of so-called post-Christians maybe, who are struggling, because I didn't know what to do and where to go. And maybe hopefully listening, to your podcast will encourage people and help them see other ways of finding a comfort, So that's, I guess
so you've left the church.
Yes.
And then what? Like, what was there an event that happened, or was it like a slowly moving away? Was there a death in your life that then made you worried about death?
No,
or was it
there
just
wasn't.
The dialogue?
It was more of there were like deaths of kind of distant family members that I wasn't close to. I mean, honestly, even to this very day, I guess I'm still very either blessed or sheltered in the way that I haven't had anyone close to me die yet. So I don't know what the grieving will be like, but another area of literature that made a big difference for me was reading about near-death experiences. So around the time I was reading Scott Peck, I also read another popular book back then was Betty Eadie's Embraced by the Light. And she really made near-death experiences mainstream back in the 80s and 90s. And actually, I'm sorry. I read Scott Peck and Betty Eadie even while I was a Christian, so that already started to kind of open my heart a bit more to other possibilities. But both authors are Christians, and Betty Eadie's in her near-death experience, she talked a lot about Jesus being the Lord and everything. She wasn't evangelical, but that was like the main figure in her near-death experience. But eventually, I started reading more and more and more. And then I came to read about near-death experiences of non-Christians. And my God, even non-Christians are seeing heaven. What's going on here? Like maybe it's going to be okay, And even some Christians are seeing hell, because there's also less than pleasant near-death experiences, the minority of them. And so then being in a college town meant there were a lot of spiritual places to check out. So I checked out like Unitarian Universalism. So that was really my next kind of phase, was being a Unitarian Universalist, and like, yes, it's all good, all paths lead to God. And, the most important thing is making a world a better place, and let the spirituality go towards that, so. That's
interesting. So maybe you heard these two authors because they were Christian, right? So you were allowed to, they had the same language, they had the same entry point, but a much softer version, right? And a little more access to it. And then, so then you got to the Universalists. Interesting. So my question is, what is it? How is your spiritual life today? One of the things I find interesting is, how does it show up? Like, do you have a practice? Does it show up at work? Does it show up in your family? Like, what does it look like today?
I am so grateful that I feel like I have a real relationship with God right now. And it's so ironic because, again, what am I right now? I don't know, but I don't pray to Jesus. I see Jesus as a master, and maybe he has some special status in the afterlife or something with Earth. But I definitely feel a very intimate relationship with God. I pray all the time, like just throughout the day. I'll just be talking to God, like thank you, like a lot of gratitude happens. I'll be walking along and I'll just say it, thank you, God, for whatever it is is on my mind. And the way it shows up in my life is that I feel like spirituality is making like the core function that it plays in my life has basically two. I see it as having two functions. One is it gives me this profound security about life and about what happens afterwards. So I've developed, having read different things, I kind of developed my own version of what I think happens in the afterlife. And it's not my own version. I'm sure lots of people believe something similar, but I literally, like, my faith has never been stronger about the unseen world, not currently measurable by science, but I think one day scientific instruments will be able to measure stuff. I mean, come on, there's, science says there's something like 80 to 90% dark matter. Like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, you mean stuff you guys don't know what it is yet? Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Like 96% of reality's dark matter is what science knows right now, right? What does that mean? So I have this, it's so funny. My faith today is stronger in the afterlife and spirituality than when I was a staunch Christian. Mm. And there's something that I think a lot of evangelical Christians are only willing to admit to, like when you're really in a private conversation with them, when they're really willing to trust you, is that they're scared that what they believe isn't true. Mm. I was one of those, and I know lots of my friends, which is why there's such a big field in evangelicalism called apologetics, which is, apologetics means learning how to persuade others and persuade yourself that the Bible is true and that the worldview of Christianity is the only worldview and the only way. But there's a lot of doubt. There's profound doubt that maybe this isn't true. Like maybe we're... and that's what tends to happen when you are so certain. It's kind of like the branch that is completely only, not flexible and can't bend in the wind will break. It has a risk of breaking. Whereas the branch that is able to sway with the wind doesn't tend to break because it's willing to be flexible and incorporate. Yeah.
That I'm curious about is this idea. This idea that one is external rules.
Yeah.
Right. You're being told this is what it is. This is what it is.
Yes.
Right. And what you're describing is you have come to it.
That's right.
You internally, the answers
That's
are
right.
internally. And because they're internal, they're stronger, they're deeper.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a great way of painting.
And also, I think that if you, like the Tao, I think if you deny doubt, or if you're not allowed to have doubt, something that's human and real in there, that the denying of a thing makes it stronger, right? It's the shadow. It's it's that work that if you would just say, yes, it's a little scary.
Yes.
Yeah. Mother Teresa had fear. She did it anyway, right? There's faith.
Yeah.
But it's those ideas that then will break you, right?
That's right.
Which is not owned.
Yeah. And so you're absolutely right, because I have developed my own philosophy from my own experiences and sort of my own personal readings and conversations. It makes a lot more sense to me. Mm-hmm. It makes sense to me, and so therefore I'm feeling very good about it. And so that's like the one function spirituality has, is sort of making me feel so secure about life and about everything, and about love, unconditional love, like the reality of it, that I think it seems to me like when someone finally comes to be no longer afraid of death, and to realize that they are forever loved, that everything life becomes easier. I don't know, because like, it's almost like no matter what happens to me in life, it's okay,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I didn't feel that way in the past, you know? And so that's one function, which has such a profound implications that show up in all kinds of ways. Like, I don't always have to get my way. You know, that's a big deal in relationships, especially. And, you know, no,
Hallelujah.
like everything's optional. Like everything's cool.
Yeah.
Like everything's optional. It's okay. You don't have to live life like the way I want you to live it, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And the second function is that I think it is continually working to make me a better person. Like, I believe one of the big purposes of life is, for me anyway, is to learn about different virtues and learn what it means to embody them in my life. And so it's just kind of like it's forming and developing my conscience.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think spirituality does. So what does honesty really mean? What does integrity mean? What does generosity really mean? What does humility really mean? What does courage really mean? You know, so yeah.
And it's so interesting. I have some family members who are atheists,
Uh-huh.
and and they yet still embody all of these things you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
And for me, the idea that they're not doing any of these to get
Yeah.
out of hell
Right.
is even more virtuous, right?
Yes.
They're not trying to
That's
avoid
right. Yeah.
pain
Right.
by
Right.
doing
They're
these
doing it
things.
because they believe it's the right thing to do.
And it's just such a, and so that's also you, like you're
Yeah.
not trying to you're not trying to do that. And so instead it's more virtuous for you to show up in that way.
Yeah.
And it's the deeper, more personal answer,
Yeah. Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
No.
really interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and the thing is, I think you're right that all of us, I hope, can find a philosophy that uh, really nourishes and encourages us to become a better version of who we are. You know, and I think when spirituality doesn't really do that, is when I get concerned about a particular path. Like, for example, there's a strain of Christianity that says God wants you to be rich. Right, like financial wealth is a
Awesome.
symbol. It is a symbol that God is thinking you're doing the right things in life. Like, the rich people are basically on the path of God, right? And so that's, or on the other hand, of course, there's also the worldview that poverty is the path to God, and the poor people are the most virtuous ones, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I just hope that we can all come to a spirituality that allows us to become more holistic about the virtues and develop the complexity of our ethics, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this, right? I just love the dialogue. That it's
Yes,
within the dialogue that this
yes,
happens for me. For
yes,
me.
yes, yeah,
So one of the things that's curious to me is that you've done, if anyone knows George's story, you've done something particularly interesting, which is you had this career, you built this practice, you did this, were highly successful in all of the ways in which you were told to do that,
yeah,
and making lots of money and having
yeah,
lots of attention, and essentially blew it up.
yeah,
I essentially said, this is not okay with me internally, right? And said, okay, how do I change this? And that turning point, that idea sounds terrifying, right?
yeah,
Except if you have your belief, right?
yeah,
All is love.
yes,
This is what are we here for, right? And
yes,
so with your basis of what you've just told me, that action makes the most sense.
mm,
And I don't know if you put those two things together, or if those two
yeah,
things have anything to do with each
I
other.
love
My
it. Oh
dog is
yes,
barking.
oh yeah, great. I love dogs. Yeah, so thank you for mentioning that. In the beginning of my business, 2009 and 2012, 13-ish, I was learning from some marketing experts and business experts that were all about the lavish lifestyle, 6-figure, 7-figure incomes. And I was able to parrot their strategies into my own financial success. And then came to this realization over time as I became conscious of the disconnect, the dissonance between my spiritual growth and my business actions. What's interesting was subconsciously I started to sabotage my business.
Yeah.
And so I remember this one month, the low point, and they'll find this ridiculous. Everyone listening will find this ridiculous, but it's all relative, right? I got to a point where I was only making $20,000 that month.
Yeah, you don't want to
oh my
say
God.
that to me. But yeah.
No, but there are these, it's
yeah, no, I get it.
God,
I get
what
it.
happened?
No. Yeah.
And so I decided, like, that was, like I said, ironic that was my low point. And so I decided to say, you know what, something's wrong. I really have to look inside and see how I'm doing these things. Grateful for that. And at that point, I stopped my business, and my income did drop way below that for a little while, because I had to reinvent how I was doing business. And I was flailing around, really, like 2013, flailing around. 2014, finally started to say, what if I gave away my knowledge instead of keeping all of it in these $2,000 training courses? And 2014, I gave away my knowledge. 2015, I started doing it like on YouTube and Facebook and being more intentional about it. And of course, now I realize that, my gosh, there is a path, even in business, where you're supposed to be, well, the way that we think business is supposed to work is being cutthroat and, being all about me and all about profit, that, wow, there is a way to align generosity, integrity, and actually develop a relationship with one's audience of trust. Like, imagine that, like the audience actually trusts you rather than you having to persuade them to do something. And so, just like you said, the spirituality is kind of finally starting to align with my business actions.
Yeah, it's really interesting as I come from the other way, which is give it away, right? Service.
Yeah.
Never asking.
Yes.
And I have to say, so I'm trying to find this balance of there is good for my clients to pay.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
that
yeah.
It's energy, that it's important, that it's about their intention, right?
Yes.
And so finding these but like in my head, right? I'm not being of service. I'm not being spiritual. My whole thing is about being of service. And so I grapple with that, right?
Yes.
Of like, I am being of service. My goal is to be of highest service to my clients. I know the work. I know how to do that.
Yes.
And then to say, but you gotta give me money. And so it works with my spiritual life. Like it's the line I keep walking, and it's the growth I have to do.
It is. And I so honor you for, I think you're coming from the right place, bottom line, honestly, ironically saying bottom line, but you really are coming from the right place. And I bet probably a lot of people listening to this have the experience that you have, like give, but then maybe neglecting one's own sustainability, right? And the way I want to think about it, and just, maybe this is a far longer conversation, but I'll just say a little bit, is that there's a couple of realities. Like, the one large reality is that in the spiritual, eternal realms, I don't think there is money. I don't think there is, hey, I'm only going to serve you if you pay me kind of thing, because it is unconditional love in the eternal realms. But for some reason, we have been put here in a boundaried realm with limitations and with time management, like there's not unlimited time like there is in the afterlife, quote unquote. And there is limited resources, unlike the afterlife where everything is completely abundant. But it's kind of like we go into a gym and lift weights. We intentionally put weights on our bodies to become stronger. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's something about being here and learning how to manage time and manage our money, being both personally sustainable and yet not being greedy, which is the total balance. And it's hard. It's really hard. That makes us stronger in our spirit in some way. And in terms of like taking money from others or asking others money, you know, sometimes we are doing work that isn't yet mainstream enough where people easily go, well, of course I should be paying you for that. Well, you came in, you're a plumber, you came and fixed my toilet. Of course I'm supposed to pay you for that. But maybe one in the past, in the village days or whatever, tribal days, people did fix your plumbing without you paying them because it was just part of the village. And now, unfortunately, we're not part of that village anymore. And it's a global village. Mm-hmm. And the way that we give to each other in this global village is money. It's not ideal, but it's how we do it, and sometimes we forget. And so I think when we ask money from somebody else and we feel that, you know what, this is a right price for what, the energy and the time I'm spending, this is a right price to charge for it. We are giving somebody else the opportunity to reciprocate and be generous in their way towards us. And that opportunity to be generous is actually, as you've mentioned, it's important for people to say, yes, I actually want to invest my money and my energy with you because I want this transformation in my life that you, Leslie, provide to me, right? Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, and I do believe it's my spiritual work, right? Like you get a calling, and my spiritual work is to stand up and receive.
Yes.
And, and your spiritual work is the same, like how to give. And it's all working in perfect alignment for our healing.
Yes.
As frustrating as that can be sometimes.
Yeah.
So I want to be mindful of time. I just have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah.
Is there anything, any final notes or anything that you would like to say or didn't say that you have an opportunity now?
Well, I'll just say that I do believe this to be true, that we are all profoundly cared for by life, by the universe, by a force that's much greater than we can imagine, infinitely loved and infinitely secure. And that no matter where we are on our path, it is an important place to be, that we're going to look back at this moment in our life and in our journey and say, that was a really important moment, every moment. And this moment is important. And so, I just want to encourage people, like wherever you are in your journey, like you're in the right place, you're in the right place. And just know that you are, I think, on a path towards an inevitable bliss that we cannot screw up. I think our eventual destination of full knowledge, full creativity, full power, full sense of love, full understanding of everything. And so I just think it's a beautiful life.
Yeah, that's so lovely. Thank you.
Yay. Thanks, Leslie.
Yeah, so I will post everything on ways to get a hold of you, ways to follow you on Facebook and all of those fun ways, and so that they can hear more about you. And as always, it's an honor and a privilege. And thank you so much for taking this time.
Thank you.
Yeah.